Chapter 1. The Things We Don't Say. There are dinners you remember for a lifetime, not because of what was said, but because of what wasn't. That night, the night everything broke, I realized how much of my life had become about silence, about pretending, about keeping up a facade that looked almost perfect to everyone but me. If you'd asked anyone who knew us, they would have told you we were one of those couples. Solid, goals, the ones who made it look easy. Sarah and I met in college, survived the awkward post-graduation years, bought a modest house in the suburbs, even adopted a dog before the idea of kids felt less terrifying. We hosted board game nights, swapped recipes with the neighbors, tried to remember date nights even when we were tired. There were fights, of course there were, but nothing dramatic, or so I thought. I used to believe that if you loved someone, you learned to forgive the little things, the late nights at work, the tired eyes, the way she stopped laughing at my jokes. Maybe I just didn't want to see the cracks. Maybe I thought if I kept holding it all together, no one else would notice the seams. But everything changed the night I saw the message. The first one. Chapter 2. Glimpses. It was late. Sarah was asleep beside me, one arm sprawled over my chest, her hair tangled against the pillow. The house was silent except for the soft ticking of the kitchen clock. I reached for my phone, scrolling mindlessly, trying to coax myself into sleep. That's when her phone buzzed, just once, soft, almost apologetic. I glanced at the screen, expecting some spam notification, maybe a weather alert. Instead, it was a message. Miss you already. Can't wait for next weekend. No name, just a number, but something about it felt wrong, too intimate, too casual for a friend or coworker. I put her phone back on the nightstand and stared at the ceiling, heart pounding. I told myself I was overreacting, that it was nothing, that I was tired and seeing shadows. The next day, I pretended nothing had happened. But once you notice a crack, it's impossible to ignore the way it spreads. Sarah had always been careful with her phone, never left it unlocked, always kept it face down. I tried not to be the jealous husband, tried to trust her like I always had, but little things began to jump out at me. The way she smiled at her phone, the texts she deleted before I could see them, the secretive calls she took in the backyard, her laugh drifting through the kitchen window like a ghost. Chapter 3. Gathering Storm. The more I noticed, the more I couldn't help myself. I started paying attention. I watched how her routines changed, how she started working late, how she came home smelling of someone else's cologne. I told myself it was paranoia, that if I looked too hard I'd find something I couldn't forgive. But suspicion is like a hunger. It grows, eats away at you, makes you do things you never thought you'd do. One evening, after she left for yoga, I checked her laptop. The password was the same as always, but now there was a new email account, one I'd never seen before. I clicked through, half hoping to find nothing. Instead, I found a folder of messages with someone named D. Flirty jokes, half-hearted apologies, plans for secret weekends. D called her beautiful, sent photos of dinners, sunsets, handwritten notes. The intimacy was unmistakable. I scrolled further, looking for a sign that this was all a joke, a misunderstanding, but there was none. I closed the laptop, hands shaking, trying to breathe through the sudden tightness in my chest. I couldn't cry, couldn't even scream. All I could do was sit there and try to make sense of the life I thought I had. Chapter 4. Old Photos, New Lies. Some betrayals happen in a single moment, a flash of anger or passion. Ours was slower, a corrosion, not a crash. Sarah and I had a shared album on our phones, thousands of pictures from all the years together. I opened it late at night, scrolling through the early days. Picnics at the lake, blurry selfies in rented cabins, her feet in the sand, laughing into the wind. I remembered how we used to sit on the porch with coffee, talking about everything and nothing. I remembered the day we got the dog, how she cried when he fell asleep in her lap. I remembered thinking, this is it. This is happiness, simple and fragile. But now, even the photos looked staged. I wondered if those smiles were already hiding secrets. I wanted to reach through the glass, warn my younger self, hold her closer, ask more questions, never assume you're immune to heartbreak. Every time I saw her after that, it was like looking at a stranger wearing my wife's face. Chapter 5. The Gathering Evidence. I started keeping a notebook, just a plain, black journal, nothing fancy. I filled it with dates, times, snippets of overheard conversations. I took photos of receipts she forgot to hide, hotel rooms, expensive dinners, gas stations hours away from anywhere she said she'd been. I listened at night as she talked in her sleep, sometimes mumbling names I didn't recognize. Sometimes I thought she whispered apologies, or maybe that was just my mind, desperate to find meaning. I tried to talk to her, asked if everything was okay. She smiled, touched my cheek, said she was just tired, work was busy, I was sweet to worry. She looked right through me. I wondered how long she'd been practicing that smile in the mirror. One afternoon, I followed her car. I hated myself for it, but I did it anyway. She drove to the other side of town, parked in a townhouse I'd never seen. I watched her ring the bell, watched a tall man open the door and pull her inside. I sat in my car for almost an hour, engine idling, mind racing. When she finally came out, she was glowing, lighter than I'd seen her in months. Chapter 6. Secrets and Small Talk. At home, everything was normal. She made dinner, asked about my day, talked about her mother's upcoming birthday. I nodded, played along, wondered if I was the only one living in this parallel world of truth and lies. That night, as I lay beside her, I realized I had crossed a line. Not just in our marriage, but in myself. I had no longer become her husband. I had become her observer, her detective, her silent accuser. I started to plan, but I didn't know for what. Confrontation? Confession? Divorce? I wasn't sure. What I did know, I couldn't live like this much longer. Then, as if the universe wanted to make things easier, or crueler, Sarah announced we'd been invited to a family dinner next Sunday. Her parents, her brother and his wife, her favorite aunt. She wanted us to go as a couple, like always. I said yes, but that night, as she slept, I started thinking of all the things I might finally say. Chapter 7. The Confidant. I didn't tell anyone at first. Secrets like this fester best in the dark. But the weight of it pressed on my chest, making it hard to breathe, hard to function, at work, at home, even with friends. I needed someone to talk to, someone who wouldn't tell me I was crazy, or worse, that I should just confront her and get it over with. So I called Mark, my oldest friend. We'd been roommates in college, shared too many hangovers and heartbreaks to count. He was blunt, the kind of person who never sugarcoated the truth. We met at the little bar we used to haunt when we were 20-somethings, now quieter, with more gray hairs among the regulars. I slid into the booth across from him, and before I could stop myself, I told him everything. The messages, the hotel receipts, the townhouse across town. He didn't say anything for a long time, just sipped his beer and watched me. "Are you sure?" he finally asked. I nodded. "Then you already know what you have to do, don't you?" I shook my head. "I don't know anything. I just know I can't keep pretending." Mark looked at me the way only an old friend can. So stop pretending. Stop letting her make you feel crazy. If you need proof, get it, but don't let this eat you alive. Chapter 8. The Ghosts of Good Intentions. Back at home, the air was thick with everything unsaid. Sarah moved through the rooms like she always did. Soft steps, humming to herself, always a little distant, as if she was already somewhere else. I remembered our first Thanksgiving in that house, the kitchen full of half-cooked food, the smoke alarm blaring, both of us laughing so hard we had to sit on the floor. For a moment, I wondered if those memories even belonged to me anymore, if they ever had. I found myself watching her when she thought I wasn't looking, not with anger, but with a strange, hollow ache. I realized I missed her, even though she was right there. Some nights I sat in the car after work just to avoid going inside. I listened to old playlists, let the music drown out my thoughts. Sometimes I imagined just driving away, leaving it all behind. But then I'd see her through the living room window, curled up with the dog, and I'd go inside, pretending one more time that everything was fine. Chapter 9. Preparing for the End. In the days leading up to the dinner, I became methodical. I printed out emails, saved voicemails to a flash drive, made copies of every piece of evidence I had, not out of spite, but out of necessity, because I knew, deep down, that Sarah was a better liar than I was an investigator. I rehearsed what I might say, how I'd say it, whether I'd be able to get the words out at all. I pictured every possible reaction: tears, denial, anger, maybe even relief. I wondered if I was looking for justice or just an ending. Sarah, meanwhile, seemed lighter than she had in months. She planned her outfit for the dinner, called her mother every day, joked about how I'd have to help her make her famous apple pie. It was as if, now that she'd made her choice, the burden was gone. I tried not to resent her for it, but it was hard. Chapter 10. The Last Morning. The morning of the dinner was crisp, the air sharp with the promise of autumn. I woke up before Sarah, lay in bed staring at the ceiling as dawn crept across the walls. The dog jumped up, curling beside me, sensing something was off. Sarah woke up humming, kissed me on the cheek, disappeared into the shower. I watched the steam swirl under the bathroom door, tried to remember the last time I'd felt at peace in my own home. I took a walk around the block, breathing deep, rehearsing my lines in the chill. I wondered if I should just let it go, keep the peace for one more day, let her keep her secret until she was ready to tell me herself. But then I remembered the look in her eyes when she thought I wasn't watching, the way she smiled at her phone, the way she laughed for someone else, and I knew I couldn't keep pretending. Not for her, not for me, not anymore. Chapter 11. The Family Table. Sarah's parents lived on the edge of town, in a house that always smelled like cinnamon and fresh bread. I parked in the familiar driveway, hands gripping the wheel so tightly my knuckles ached. Sarah chatted about her cousin's engagement and the best route to avoid Sunday traffic. I nodded in the right places, a spectator in my own life. Inside, the house buzzed with noise, her father bellowing greetings, her mother fussing over place settings, her brother and his wife bickering in the hallway. I was hugged, handed a drink, swept into a flurry of small talk. It should have felt normal, but everything was off-key, like listening to a song you almost recognize but can't quite place. Sarah slipped in easily to her role, perfect daughter, attentive partner, smiling at jokes that weren't funny, doting on her mother. Watching her, I saw flashes of the woman I married, or maybe I was just seeing the version she wanted everyone to see. As the appetizers disappeared and conversation shifted from politics to vacation plans, I felt the walls closing in. I tried to imagine what would happen when I finally said the words I'd rehearsed for days. My heart hammered in my chest, sweat gathering at my collar. Chapter 12. Subtle Cracks. At dinner, I watched the tiny moments, the way Sarah's eyes flickered to her phone when she thought no one was looking, the slight tremor in her hand when she reached for her glass, the almost imperceptible tightening of her jaw when her father asked about our marriage, if we were still happy as ever. Her mother complimented the apple pie. Her brother joked about our boring, drama-free life. Sarah laughed too loudly. I wondered if anyone else heard the edge in it. No one seemed to notice my silence. If they did, they chalked it up to nerves or a long work week. I envied their ignorance. I envied the ease with which Sarah kept the mask in place. Chapter 13. The Toast. Dessert plates clinked, coffee brewed, laughter filled the room. Sarah's father stood to make his traditional toast, a rambling, affectionate tribute to family, love, and sticking together through anything. I barely heard the words. My mind replayed everything I gathered, the texts, the emails, the nights spent alone in a bed meant for two. The room quieted as he finished, glasses raised. I stared at Sarah, who smiled at me, a question in her eyes. Was I still playing along? And suddenly I knew. This was the moment. Not because it was dramatic, not because I wanted revenge, but because I couldn't breathe under the weight of all these secrets anymore. Chapter 14. Revelation. I cleared my throat, my voice startling in the hush. I'm sorry. I need to say something. Chairs scraped, every face turned to me. Sarah's eyes widened, a glimmer of panic beneath the practiced calm. I reached into my jacket, pulled out the envelope, placed it on the table in front of her. There are things that need to be said, no matter how much it hurts. I slid the envelope closer. Sarah, maybe you want to explain these to your family, or I can. She didn't move. For a moment, no one did. Her mother's fork hovered in midair, her brother's mouth hung open. Sarah's hands trembled as she finally opened the envelope. Inside, the printed emails, screenshots, receipts, photos, everything. The evidence of a year spent living two lives. Sarah stared at the pages in silence. Her lips moved, but no words came out. Chapter 15. The Silence After. The next few moments felt endless. Her father muttered, "What is this?" Her mother began to cry. Her brother set down his coffee with a heavy thunk. Sarah tried to speak, but her voice was barely a whisper. "It's not what it looks like." But it was. Everyone knew. The room filled with a different kind of silence, the kind that settles in when you realize nothing will ever be the same. I stood up, heart pounding, hands shaking. "I'm sorry," I said, not just to her, but to everyone. I couldn't keep pretending. For a heartbeat, nobody moved. Then her mother sobbed, her father shouted, her brother glared at me, at Sarah, at the world. Sarah reached for me, but I stepped away. I turned and walked out, the door closing behind me with a finality I'd never known before. Chapter 16. Aftermath. Outside, the air was cold and sharp. I stood on the porch, breathing in, trying to steady myself. Inside, I heard raised voices, chairs scraping, someone, maybe Sarah, crying. But the night was quiet, almost peaceful. I walked to my car and sat behind the wheel, staring at the house I'd been part of for so long. I thought I would feel relief, but instead there was a hollow ache, as if a part of me had been cut away. I drove home alone. The house felt emptier than ever, but at least now it was honest. I poured myself a drink, sat on the back steps and watched the stars. I didn't know what would happen next. Divorce, apologies, maybe even forgiveness one day. But I knew I couldn't go back. Chapter 17. Reflection. In the weeks that followed, I avoided calls from Sarah, from her family. I buried myself in work, in chores, in anything that kept my mind from replaying that night. Some friends told me I'd done the right thing. Others wondered if I should have handled it privately. Maybe they were right. But secrets like that, they grow in the dark, infect everything. I missed the one I thought Sarah was. I missed our dog, her parents, the life we built. But I didn't miss the lies. I didn't miss pretending. Sometimes, late at night, I replayed the dinner in my mind. I wondered what would have happened if I'd stayed silent. Would we have lasted another year? Would I have become a ghost in my own home? Chapter 18. Letting Go. One evening, months later, I found an old photo of us. Sarah laughing, wind in her hair, eyes bright with the kind of happiness that doesn't survive secrets. I sat on the floor, let myself remember it all. Let the tears come for the first time. Letting go wasn't a single act. It was 1,000 little choices every day. Waking up in an empty house, making coffee for one, learning to sleep without waiting for the sound of her voice in the dark. But in the silence that followed, I found a kind of peace. The pain didn't vanish, but it became bearable. A scar, not a wound. Epilogue. What would you have done? I never got closure, not really. Maybe there's no such thing, just the slow acceptance that some things break and never heal the way you want. But I told the truth, finally, and set myself free. If you've ever sat at a table full of secrets, wondering if you're the only one pretending, you're not alone. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is say what no one wants to hear. Would you have done the same? Or would you have stayed silent, kept pretending, and let the secret eat you alive? Let me know what you would do if you were in my place.